Thanks so much for coming to our first Denver Tug meeting of the year. We weren't able to meet too much last year with COVID and everything crazy that happened. So this is our first meeting under new leadership of 2021 on this really nice March Friday afternoon. So going through this agenda, I should have taken this proposed out. This is the definite agenda. We'll start off with welcome. I'll talk a little. The other two tug leaders will talk. Jay Farias from Evolytics will give a table calcs presentation. Then we'll go into some speed tipping and dashboard design. We have a trivia game that will be giving away an e-learning license and a couple gift cards to the Tableau store for some really cool stuff that you can buy. I wish I could win one of these myself. And then we'll have some closing remarks and time for networking. And our Zoom room will stay open after 4:30 if you guys want to keep on talking. We don't have a hard stop. There's no other groups that are using our Zoom login. So with that, meet your tug leaders. I'll go first. I'm Caitlin McCluskey Fitch. I've lived in Colorado since 2010. And I'm originally from Florida. I moved here to go to CU Boulder in 2010 and I loved it. So I've been here ever since. I was a data viz hobbyist up until December of last year. That's when I started at Evolytics. Up until then, I'd been primarily doing like Makeover Mondays and my own personal data viz stuff. And finally, I was able to get a job professionally doing data viz, which was really exciting. I'm a certified desktop associate that I need to renew that coming up in June. And I'm a proud parent to 2 cats, Laura and Winston, and 1 dog, Abby. I'm semi-active on Twitter. I basically only post about Tableau and data viz stuff, and you can check out my profile there. Oh, and I'm a strategy and analysis manager at Evolytics. Mary?
Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Griffin. I grew up in Colorado Springs, went to Pikes Peak Community College, and then transferred to UCCS down there. With degrees with anthropology and geography. And I moved into a position doing space planning for military installations in a small local firm, and eventually transferred up to or moved to a company in Denver. And when I started, I didn't know anything about Tableau. And over the years, I started using it for my particular projects, and now I am the Tableau person in our office. I was fortunate enough to attend some of the annual conferences. I find them extremely informative and really educational, so I'm a big proponent of those, always happy if I get to go. And I share a place with 2 cats, Sochi and Bruce, and then also 2 turtles that we've had in our family actually for probably 30 years. That's me.
Hey everyone, I'm Greg. I am up near Boulder in Superior, if you're familiar with that area. I've been in Colorado since 2014. We moved out here from DC, originally from North Carolina. So if you're back east, love to chat. If you're from back east. I've been using Tableau since January 2019, so a little over 2 years. Had kind of a crush on it ever since. Started at work and also progressed into my own time with a lot of the community initiatives like Makeover Monday, Workout Wednesday. Was fortunate enough to actually go to TC19 in Vegas. The last live conference, came out of that super pumped about getting involved more in the communities, and then obviously the world turned upside down. So was really excited when I heard that Denver Tug was going to get revitalized, and then really happy that I'm able to help out as well. Little bit of background, my resume is like super complicated and takes a long time, so I'll skip to the most interesting part. I am a veteran. My first job out of college was on a nuclear submarine. I did that for 7 years. So if you're a veteran as well, definitely reach out. I'd love to connect. I also have a cat and a dog, but also have 2 humans, Max and Miles, who keep us plenty busy and enjoying all that Colorado has to offer. Ski a bunch. And my socials are there. That I, like Caitlin, also only post about Tableau on Twitter. So you'll see a lot about that. And then if you want to check me out, that is Caitlin's.
We'll fix that,
Tableau
that link.
public.
We do not share a Tableau public profile.
Yeah, so I'll get that done, but it's also on my Twitter, so you can find me there. But thanks to everyone for coming. Thanks to Jay, our guest speaker, and Caitlin, our temporary guest speaker for this this quarter.
Cool, thanks guys. So getting into our schedule, Mary, do you want to talk through this?
Sure. So what we've set up right now, at least to start out, is that we want to meet every first Friday of the month, kind of get it in our routine. We plan to, at minimum, have some sort of presentation, prepared content once a quarter. And then the other Fridays, for now, we're going to have it set up as like live forums where you can do peer review, bring your questions, collaborate like you would at the forum, but with people in the room. We'll commit to at least starting those meetings and having them open for 15 minutes. If nobody shows up, we'll go ahead and close it out. But we have a sign-up sheet if you do want to participate and share information in advance. We'll show you where that's held at later on. And then as we go down and collect suggestions, we're real flexible. We may shift and do more prepared content or split the meetings half and half. We're real open to what the group is looking for to get out of meeting together. With the community forum, we have set up some links and we're using this as our primary communication back and forth. So if you'd like to make a suggestion, we've pinned a comment, or we've pinned a post at the top. Just go in, add comments to it, review others' comments, and thumbs up the suggestions that you support. We also have some, for the first Fridays, the resources up in the left, there you go, Denver Tug live forum sign up sheet, and also Denver Tug presentation guidelines and sign up if you're looking to present at any of the meetings. We'll continue to add to the resources there as we go along and get those collected. And I guess that's okay. So here's some examples of the live forum and the presentation guidelines and sign up sheets when you go to those. They're just click on the links and it should open it up and fill in your information.
Greg?
Yes, here. So we just put this together. This was a survey that got shared out. So hopefully some folks saw it, but this was posted on the community forum and some other places, just regarding some of the preferences that we have for the group as we are restarting. You can see at the top the summary numbers there, 22 total responses. So kind of take that into account here. We do have 145 people as of this morning that RSVP'd to this. So like great interest in this, but kind of a smaller sample of those that we have on response. But you can kind of see the trends in terms of what people are looking for these quarterly events. In terms of length, that's skewed more on the shorter side. Nobody wanted to spend 2 hours on a Friday to do the quarterly events. So consistent there. We got most folks that are in 2020 version, some form of 2020 version right now. Down at the bottom, you can see kind of a heat map with the marginals on topics that we're interested in or not interested in. Lower left is the topics. These are rated 1 to 4, with 1 being least interested, 4 being most, and the blue were the more interest. So tips and tricks came out on top with company use cases and best practices. We're pretty close behind. Not a whole lot of interest in server or backend material. So that was kind of the by far shorter than the others. And then lastly, the dates and times, wasn't a whole lot of differentiation. You can see at the bottom with the bars in the margins, Not a whole lot of differentiation across days, definitely skewed towards the afternoon in terms of meeting times. So we'll take that into account going forward. But you can find this on both the community page. Hopefully it's going to get posted. We're working that out to be able to actually host it and embed it in the community page. But if not, it'll be available soon.
Awesome, thank you. So getting into our first presentation, this will be a table calcs from first to last with Jay. I will close out of this and make him the presenter so that he's able to share his screen. And I apologize, guys.
I just took it from you. Don't worry.
Oh, okay, cool.
All right, everybody see my screen? Yeah, okay, cool.
Yes.
All right, so welcome everybody. This is my presentation on table calcs from first to last, going with the Tableau pun title. I am Jay Farias. I'm the data viz manager at Evolytics in Kansas City. We're a small consultancy, do a lot of Tableau work. I've been in Tableau for 5 years now. I'm a certified desktop associate and the co-leader of the Kansas City Tableau user group. Been so for about the past year. I love Tableau. I think it's awesome. I have like a technical engineering background, so like the logic really drew me in. And now as I get more into the program, the design and aesthetics have started to be kind of my focus with the program. So today, this is a presentation for Tableau developers. So we're going to cover what are table calculations. We're going to look at some quick table calcs. We're going to look at some custom table calculations. And then we'll also get into the fun part, which is creative uses for table calculations. Where I'll run through about 5 use cases with some questions, and we'll figure out how to answer those questions. All right, so what are table calculations? Well, they're transformation. This is per the Tableau dictionary, the Tableau definition on their website. You apply transformation, you apply to the values in a visualization. Table calculations are a special type of calculated field that computes on the local data in Tableau. They're calculated based on what is currently in the visualization and do not consider any measures or dimensions that are figured out. So I've highlighted in bold like the important stuff, like it's stuff that's in your worksheet. That's it, that's all it's doing. So you want to use table calcs when your data you need is already in your view. You want to perform something that you've already filtered down through, have your dimensions and stuff. And then important to note that when I first learned Tableau, I was tripped up on, you can only perform table calculations on a single measure, right? You can't like take one measure and subtract it from another measure. Like that doesn't work that way. They're within a single measure. Okay, so what do table calculations need? They need a measure, they need a scope or a partition, which is your table, your pane, your cell, or specific dimensions, and they need a direction. They need to go down or across or through a specific dimension. So on the right here is a screenshot of the menu that you get when you edit a table calculation. You can see you have a type, you have a compute using, which gives you essentially your scope and your direction, all the different permutations for that, and then some other options. Okay, so some commonly used functions, and these are table calcs, which Tableau has put these in the quick table calc menu in a drop down on a measure, are running sum or running total, the difference from, the percent difference from, moving average, percent of total, and rank. So those are pretty common ones that we use a lot with table calcs. So looking at these, we're going to go through like visually how these table calculations are computed. So this is a difference calculation. So we're looking at a difference, and the scope for this is the table. So it's going to span the entire table before it resets, and the direction is across. So we can see that here, that this is the difference in sales per year by month. So this calculation is going across, so it's going to be by year. The month isn't going to factor into it. It's going to be January 2012 of January minus 2011 of January, 2013 of January minus 2012 of January, etc. over. So we can see we have no values in 2011 because that value is 2012 is subtracting from that. So usually with table calcs like this, you're not gonna see a value in one of the panes or one of the rows or columns. All right, so this is the exact same layout, the exact same calculation, the exact same scope, except our direction is now down. So this direction of down is going to give us a difference in sales per month by year. So we're going to subtract February from January, March from February, April from March, etc., going down the table. So now we don't have a value in January because that value has nothing to subtract from like in the previous period. So exact same layout, but different direction, same scope. So let's look at a scope of a pane. So same calculation, we're using difference, so we're subtracting. Our scope is our pane here and our direction is down. So this is going to give us a completely different value. It's going to give us our difference in sales per month by year, restarting every quarter, which is the pane. So the pane here is your second indentation of your dimension. So month is the pane. And so it's going to restart after it goes one full pane. So Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. So everything's the same except our scope is now different and it's going to restart. The last kind of common way to do this is specific dimensions. So this is literally picking what you want it to compute by using your dimensions that are in your view. So you can move stuff around in your view if you use this, and it's not going to affect like how it's calculating. It's still going to calculate the same way. So here we have specific dimensions, and we're choosing month and quarter, and we're not checking year over here on the right, computing at the level of deepest. So our deepest level of this is month. So quarter is the shallowest and month is the deepest, right? We go deep in relative to the previous. So this is going to give us the difference in sales at the deepest level, which is the month, relative to the previous value, restarting every year, which is our unchecked dimension here. So if you uncheck a dimension, that's where it's going to restart at. So what's really cool with table calcs is you can do it relative to like first or last or previous. You can put some stuff in there. So this one is just previous, so it's just going to be the month before, but we could also do every month compared to January or every month compared to December, and it's really easy to set that up. Okay, so let's look at some quick table calcs and just what we get when we perform these in Tableau. To get there, you just need to right click on a measure that's in your view, or click the little caret in the drop down, go down to quick table calculation, and then you have this list here. So that's how we access a quick table calculation. It's nice and quick. So let's look at running total, running sum. So the calculation here is running total. Our scope is the table and our direction is down. So this is simply just going to add each month to the previous month, like summing all the way down. So our first month is just going to be January, but our second month is going to be February plus January. Our third is going to be March plus February plus January, etc., all the way down. That's our scope. Nice and easy. This is the exact same calculation, just our direction is across, and this is using a chart instead of a table. And so we have a line chart here with the exact same resulting number of 484,247. And since now our month is on our columns instead of our rows, we need to go across with the table calculation instead of down, because our months are now going left to right in our columns. So this and this will give us the exact same thing, but because our dimensions are laid out differently, we're going to have to do a different direction. And Tableau is pretty smart about figuring out what direction. If you only have one dimension in the view, it's usually going to give you the correct direction across or down. So this is percent difference again, just going down. We can see the difference in sales for each month. We get that value. This is percent of total. So this is distribution, how much each sales amount contributes to the total sales amount. So we can see that September is our biggest sales amount with 17% of the total, November close behind with 16, and February the smallest with 1. This is rank. So this is very similar. So now we can rank our sales. So we can see September is number 1. We just discovered that with the biggest share too. November is number 2. So this is just rank of sum of sales. And then percentile, this is just kind of a distribution. September is the largest with the 100%, and February is in the 0th percentile. Another one we can do is moving average. And so this one, you can do a moving calculation, and you can actually set, how many you want to include before or after the specific point that you're looking at. So we can see here that this is the previous two. So this is the average sales of this previous 2 months sum of sales. And we can kind of see that with the gray line is the actual sales and the blue line is the moving average. So another thing that's cool with table calcs is that you can actually, once you do a quick table calc, you can go edit it in the shelf and see the syntax that Tableau is creating for you. And so we can click edit in shelf and see here that we have window average of sum of sales -2 and 0. So that means it's the 2 points prior to the point you're looking at and no points ahead. So you can go in and modify this if you want. If you modify it, it's going to change it to an actual calculation. You're not going to have the little sum of sales delta anymore. You're going to get the actual syntax that's in there. Another thing you can do is you can actually drag your table calcs from your rows or column shelves over to your data pane, and it will create a calculated field for you. And you can name this field, and then now that calculation is saved. And so you can use it other places. You can now modify it over here as a regular calculated field, which is now a custom table calc. And those effects will take place wherever that field is used. So this is pretty cool too. And this is, you can modify it and set some defaults. Another thing you can do is use the calculation helper. And so that will give you kind of, like if you guys use, I use this a lot when I'm using new functions. I used it for like ISO weekday function this week. I've never used that before. So I went in, I was like, oh, I think I can calculate the weekdays. Calculation helper is really, really helpful. And you can do it with table calcs too. You can see what arguments it takes, an example of what's going to happen, gives you a nice little definition of it. So this is window average and the helper for that. Okay, so let's get into custom table calcs now that we have reviewed a little bit about them as well. So here are all the custom table calculations available within Tableau. We can see we have some like row level ones with first index and last. We've got some rank. There's a bunch of different ranks you can do, whether you want your rank value to be unique or you want them to be in a percentile. A lot of different options there. I've got some running functions. We got some script functions, which I think are Python. And then we get a lot of window functions. So window functions compute only across what's in your table, what you're looking at right now. A lot of options there. So let's look at some of the few of the simpler custom table calculations. So this is rank. So this will return the rank of an item given a specific metric. So with table calcs, they have to be at aggregate already. So you got to put a sum of sales inside your rank because you're ranking what it's already aggregating. So you're kind of double aggregating. So here's the example of what rank of sum of sales looks like going down. Here's what your index function gives you. It returns the row number. So we can use this to find the row number in our table. And then first and last, just give us the difference in row number from the first or last row. First is going to give us a negative number as the distance away from the first row with an index of 0. And last is going to give us a positive number away from the last row with an index of 0. So these have some handy use cases. So here's window average. So this is the window average for the sum of sales. So this looks a lot like a level of detail, right? We get the same value in every cell across our table because it's the average for the entire partition that we're looking at for the sum of the sales. So we're summing all these together, averaging them, and then we get this value. So you can do some percent of totals with this really quick, do some baseline, stuff like that. All right, let's get into the fun part, creative uses for table calculations. Okay, so each of these is going to be framed as like a business question kind of, and then we're going to try to solve it. So what's an easy way to show only the last completed month of a percent of difference calculation and do so dynamically? So let's say that I have a percent difference calculation, and my data is dynamic, and I have a date filter on here. Excuse me. But I can't use the date filter for my percent difference, right? Because I don't want to filter out. I can't filter out. I can only look at the last month because then it would filter out and my table calculation wouldn't work. So what we can do is we can use the last function here. So the last function is going to give us the distance away from the last row, which is what we care about, right? So we can put our last function on there. We can see that if I only care about the rightmost value in my table, that value is always going to be 0. So if I use that last function and create a filter and put that on my filter shelf for last at most equals 0, then it's only going to show the most recent value in my table calculation is still going to be valid because that last filter happens after it's the last in the hierarchy of filters, right? In my order of operations. So my initial table calculation still works. My percent difference is still valid, but I'm only showing the last value. So this is a trick I like to use a lot for dynamic stuff when I'm doing, percent difference between like week over week or month over month or whatever. And I just real quick throw that on there, throw my last function, look at the last one, and then all my data is in there, but I'm only showing the very last value. So there's a simple one. Another one we can do is what's an easy way to show the percent of sales for just the furniture category? Now, again, we're going to use a table calculation to calculate the percent of sales per category, but we only want to show one of those categories. So we can't filter for just that category because then our percent of total calculation won't work. So you can do this a bunch of different ways, but what I found the easiest way to do is we apply our percent of total calculation, right? So quick table calc, percent of total, and we can see each of the categories and their percent of total. And then we can use the hide feature. So I don't know if you guys have used this before, but if you just right click on your values in there, select them, you'll get this hide option. So hiding literally just hides it. It takes it out of the view, but your table calculation will still work. Now, I wasn't familiar with this function until a couple years ago. I got into actually Lindsay Poulter's workbook and didn't know how she was doing what she was doing. And then I realized, oh, she's hiding stuff. Oh, that's genius. You can use table calculations and then the hide function. And there we go. We only have our furniture category showing, but our percent of total is still there. Didn't have to use any filters. Really simple, really easy to do. So let me go over and demo. Sorry, I was going to demo all these. Let's demo this one. So to do this, here's our percent of total, or here's our sum of sales by category. Now to add my quick table calculation for percent of total, I'm just going to click on my sum of sales, come over to percent of total, and select that. So that gives me my percent of total. And I think what I want is just furniture. So I need to select those two. Is that on my mouse? So I'm going to hide that. I'm just going to hide them one at a time. So I can just hide each one of those. So there we go. It's that simple. Now you kind of need to remember that you hid something. If somebody else comes into this workbook and goes to the sheet and doesn't know how you're doing this, then what I like to do to leave notes in my workbook is just show the caption. I come down here and be like, I'm hiding two categories, right? So I'll leave notes throughout my workbook like this, especially as a consultant when I hand my workbooks off to people to let them know like what I've done. In my calculations, I'll leave notes. So if somebody comes into the sheet and they see that, I'm like, oh, okay, they're hiding it. So how do I unhide it? I right click on it, show hidden data, and then there it is again. Okay, let's get into the next one. How can we easily categorize and visualize subcategories that have above average and below average sales? So we can see all of our sales by subcategory sorted descending in our bar chart. We want to know like which ones are above average and which ones are below average. So we can do that by writing a custom table calculation using that window average function. So this is the calculation. So if the sum of sales is greater than the window average sum of sales, then we're going to return above. Else if the sum of sales is less than the window average sum of sales, then we're going to return below. And then in the off chance that it's equal, I'm just going to return equal to, because that's the only other case, right? So this is going to return a string value, which then we can use as a dimension on our view. So let's see what that looks like. So I made that calculated field. I've put it on my rows. I've also put it on my color, and we can easily see, you know, which categories have above average sales and which categories have below average sales. And you could put the average in a tooltip or whatever if you wanted to make it known to the user, or put it in like another sheet and put it somewhere else. So let's see how we do this one. Average group. So here's my initial view. I've got subcategory and sales. Yeah. Nope. And 2020.4. There we go. Okay. Here's my syntax. Again, sum of sales. So that's going to return. That's going to give me, you know, each of these subcategories. That's what my level of detail at is in my sheet is greater than the window average for the sum of sales. So it's going to take every one of these and give me the average. Then above, else if it's below, then below, else equal to. So I create that calculated field. I can pull it out, put it on my dimensions. I get a nice split here as a new partition. Then I can take it and put it on my color as well and easily see that. And if I, you know, wanted to see it as a, I guess I'll have there. So yeah, breaks it down nice and easy. It's totally dynamic. It's fast. So table calculations are fast, right? You can do a lot of things with table calculations. You can do a lot of things with LODs that you can do with table calcs, but table calculations are always going to be faster, right? Because you're only using data that's already in your view. Tableau's already calculated all these values. They're already at aggregate, and it's just taking the aggregate values and doing more calculations on them. So they will vastly improve the speed of your workbooks if you can learn how to use them versus LODs or other calculations. Okay. Creative use number 4. How do we show the running distribution of sales by segment by month? So I want to see each segment and see the distribution over time. So what we can do here, we're actually going to use a nested table calculation. We're going to use a secondary table calculation. So first thing we're going to do is a running total. So we're going to do a quick table calculation, add a running total calculation to our sales. And then we're going to use this feature right here, add secondary calculation. So with certain table calculations, you can also add a secondary table calculation to it. So with this one, we're going to add a secondary calculation and do percent of total. And we're going to do that by segment. So we're going to use specific dimensions here to look at it by segment to get what we want. So that's going to give us this, which is over time, we're seeing how the distribution of sales in each segment changed, and not just for that month, but seeing the distribution change. So we have a final state that is today. So this last bar is like at aggregate over time. This is what it is. So you can kind of see how things change over time. So let's go demo this one. So here's our initial bar chart, right? We have by month of order date. We're looking at the sum of sales, and we have it colored by segment. So we can kind of see, you know, fluctuations month to month, but I want to see how it changes as a whole over time. So first thing I'm going to do is add a quick table calculation, and I'm going to add running total. So that's the first one we're going to do. So that gives us this, which is still pretty cool. We can see how each of them accumulate over time. But we're going to edit this. So we're going to come down, hit the drop down, edit table calculation. Yep. And we're going to check this box here to add a secondary calculation. And what we're going to do here is we're going to do a calculation type percent of total. And that's not what we want, right? We don't want it by both dimensions. We don't want to do by month. We just want the percent of total by the segment. We want the first one to go all the way across the month of order date, but this one we want by segment only. So specific dimensions, segment. And then there we go. And we get most recent, there we go. Yeah, we get the distribution over time as a percent of total throughout the months. All right, so the last one. This one gets a little bit complicated. I stole this from another blog, but I have had to use this at in marketing before to like normalize campaign start dates and stuff. So how can we visualize subcategory profits over time normalized to a starting date? So this is what we want to end up with, right? We want a time series chart by subcategory. We want everything to start at the same point. Because if we didn't have a subcategory until 6 months into our business, then we can't compare it how it did in its first month to another category in its first month. So we need to normalize everything down to like month 0, essentially. And then we can see how it goes over time. But we can see some of these don't span the full width, which means they either didn't start on time. We didn't have that category when we started, or nobody ordered from them. But we can at least see, by month how that worked. So to do this one, we're going to use 4 fields, basically. We're going to use an index function here to normalize everything, and that's going to be on our columns. So that's going to be going left to right. We're going to use a running total on our profit using the specific dimensions of month of ship date, which is actually going to be on our detail shelf over here, because we don't want that in our view. We're not looking at it by continuous month, we're looking at it by the index after we normalize it. And then our subcategory is going to be our color, right? That's going to be a level of detail of what we're going to visualize it by. So if we do that, we get this view. So let me run through how to do that. We're going to need index on top and sum of profit right here, subcategory on color, and month of ship date over here. And then we just set our table calculations. So I have an index function here. So all that is just index. Oops. So it's just the index function. It's just going to give you a row or position, I guess. I'm going to drag that out as discrete. Wait, I need a discrete. Yeah. So we're going to mess with all this stuff in a little bit. And then we need sum of profit. We need month of order date. There. We need subcategory, I believe, on color. And then we need sum of profit on our row shelf. Okay. So we need to do sum of profit by month of ship date. That is running total compute using order date. That should work there. There we go. Okay, so our index is using the order date as well. So it's basically taking the index of the month of the order date and normalizing it to 0. That's going to be our table calculation going left to right. And then our sum of profit is also using the order date to do that. And then we're visualizing by subcategory, and this is just over here so we can use it in our table calculations. So this is how you can normalize things that start at different dates. I think the example that I got this from used like movie ticket sales, right? If you can normalize those into the same date, you can see how movies perform in their first, second, third, fourth weeks or whatever. So good use case for just normalizing things that start at different periods. Okay, you guys have any questions on table calcs? Feel free to shoot them over in the chat. I can answer them right now if we have any. And then you can also find a lot of tutorials. We have a ton of tutorials on our blog, evolytics.com. My name is Jay. There's my Twitter handle. I don't tweet about anything but data viz either. Most of it's retweets on stuff that I find that's cool. All right.
We haven't had any questions yet in the chat, but does anyone have anything that you want to ask Jay before he leaves to go play disc golf?
All right. All right. Hope everybody found something in there that was useful.
Thank you so much, Jay.
Yep.
Okay, so our next presentation is going to be from me. I will share my screen and we will just dive right in. gonna move this over. Can you guys still see it, or did it? Oh no, it paused it. Okay, can you guys all see my screen? Cool. So our next presentation is going to be speed tipping. I'm going to go through about 20 dashboard tips in 20 minutes. I'm not starting the clock until I'm actually doing my tips because I will definitely go over. Just a reminder, you don't need to take notes. Please don't try, because I'm going to be talking pretty fast and you're not going to be able to keep up with what I'm saying if you're trying to take notes down, or if you're trying to follow along in your own Tableau workbook, probably not going to work out for you super well. A link to the slide deck that I have prepared that I'm reading off of this packaged workbook will be sent after the meeting. We'll probably put them in our community resources. And I will be writing a blog post on my blog, datavisandpets.com. And like Jay said, Evolytics has a bunch of blog posts on a lot of the topics that I'm going to talk about today. So a quick roadmap on what are we covering. We'll be going through 3 sets of tips: layout, design, and interactivity. A lot of these are going to be pretty applicable to all of these categories, but I think it's helpful just to have like a roadmap of where we're going. So with that, let me get my speaker notes up and we will get started. Oh, and one thing before we get started, I built out this really simple working dashboard using the Superstore data set. So afterwards, if you want to figure out how I did any of this, you can. It's super simple. And as we go through this, I'll have a couple of other example dashboards that I'll be showing, but this is the one that we're primarily going to be working off of. So with that, let me get my speaker notes ready, and I'm going to set 20 minutes on my clock. I don't know if you guys can see that. So I'm going to go through as many of these as I can in 20 minutes. I can be a pretty fast talker, so I'm going to try to get through all of them. If I'm going too fast, please say something in the chat, and Mary or Greg, you guys can speak up because I will not be monitoring the chat while I'm going through this, and just trying to get through everything as quickly as possible. Okay, so starting the clock now. First tip is designing for the device layout that your dashboard is going to be eventually viewed on. So start off with the most common denominator. I don't have very many clients that use their dashboards on mobile devices, but if you know that you're publishing to Tableau public and people might be viewing it on their mobile, keep that in mind as you're building out. We have 3 different sizes that you can choose from. Starting off with fixed size, this is what I typically work from, since there are a bunch of pre-rendered device layouts that you can choose from. Sometimes I'll go with custom if I just don't find one that really works with the height and width that I want, but most likely you can find one here that works well. Fixed is also really good because it'll load the fastest on Tableau server or Tableau online. Since everything is cached already, you don't have to worry about your device layout needing to be refreshed every time. Dashboards with variable sizes need to be freshly rendered for every browser request. Our second and third options are automatic. I typically stay away from this since your dashboard is going to be widened or shrunk depending on whatever dimensions you're being viewed at. So right now this got pretty wide. It doesn't look too bad, but if I try to shrink my screen down, you can see that doesn't look too good. My bar chart has disappeared, my map is huge, and my viz and tooltips are massive. So stay away from automatic unless you really like them for some reason, or you're using a tiled layout. That's really the only case I would say go automatic. And last, we have a range. This isn't one that I use super often, but it can be good for mobile layouts, or if you know that your dashboard looks really good when it's rendered in between 2 sets of sizes. But generally, stay within fixed size. I'm going to go back to generic desktop for the purpose of this example. Second tip is using the device preview pane. When you turn this on, it's going to turn gray. When it's off, it turns back to white. Toggle through these to see your different device types. So by default, you're seeing whatever you have chosen here. Let's toggle over to tablet. If someone's viewing this on a tablet with this model, they're only going to be viewing this amount of your dashboard. So everything that's off to here isn't going to be viewed. This is nice to check just how exactly it's going to look. Like, we know that we're not designing this for mobile, so someone on mobile isn't going to have a great experience. But if you do want to create new or unique layouts, you can easily do that over here. You'll see that it's locked by default. If we edit it, we can choose our different size, layout. I'm not going to go through this, but I highly recommend playing around with it and just seeing what it's capable of here. We will delete that, get out of device preview, and go on to our next tip, which is designing on a grid. This is a really fundamental graphic design concept that I highly recommend using. Super easy to turn it on. You can either just hit the G key on your keyboard, and that's going to turn it on in the background. To toggle it off, hit G again. You can also go up to dashboard, show grid, and to change your grid options, by default, we have our square set at 20 pixels. You could bring this down all the way to 1 pixel. That's going to get super, super tiny, or not 1, 5 is the smallest. That's going to get really tiny. It's not super helpful. You can also go up to 1,000. That gives us like 1, 2 grids. So also not super helpful. Usually 20 is good, and you can go up or down from there. Okay, turn off my grid. Next, tiled versus floating. There's a good chance that you're probably on team tiled or team floating already, so I'm not going to try to change your mind on this, but just giving you a little bit more information about both of them. I personally am more team floating, but team tiled has some good uses when you need them. Ways to think about this are like puzzle pieces. Tiled items don't overlap. You can think of them like the puzzle pieces that are making up the puzzle. They're not going to ever overlap, and you'll still be able to see the whole puzzle picture. These become part of a single layer grid that resizes based on your overall dashboard size. Whereas floating items can be layered and placed anywhere on the canvas, this option has a lot more flexibility for sizing and placement. I tend to be more in the floating camp since it's just easier to design when I'm doing a personal project, but some people really like tiled for its structure. It definitely forces you to be more organized, which sometimes I struggle with as a person. Next tip is using layout containers. You can think of them as horizontal. Your items are coming in side by side, or vertical. Your items are going stacked top to bottom. To illustrate, let's create a horizontal container. I'll start with tiled, drag horizontal over, and I'll bring over 2 charts. You can see Tableau is giving me some options for where I might want to put this. This can be a little bit tricky when you're first getting started with layout containers, so I recommend just playing around with this until you figure out how these work. Even though I have my horizontal container, you can see that my parameters and my legends have been put off into their own vertical tiled container over here. You can easily select your layout container just by clicking on this little handle icon that pops up here. We'll also go through the vertical. It's pretty similar. Now we're just going from top to bottom, and you see that our parameters and our legends are still staying over here. Layout containers are really powerful, probably the most powerful when you're using them in a nested capacity. So even though here we have our vertical container, I can drag a horizontal up top. I want this to only be on top of my charts, and then I can bring over my scorecards, resize them as needed. I can click up here, resize this down, and get my layout containers starting to work together. Something that helps as you're starting to use layout containers is to sketch them out. I got this screenshot from a blog on the data school. It's a little bit small, but the whole concept here is that you start off by just laying out what do you ultimately want your dashboard to look like, your titles, your sheets, whatnot, and then translate that into how are these going to fall into vertical, horizontal, vertical containers. You can do this with tiled or with floating. I like to start using layout containers as floating, and then sometimes I'll transfer them into a tiled layout once I have everything finalized, but it's a lot easier to make changes on the fly when you're using floating than it is than when you're using tiled. Going back to our working dashboard, our next tip is just to help keep you organized. It can be a little bit tedious, but it is really helpful to name the items that are in your item hierarchy. If you don't name them, then you're just going to have something like this would be horizontal, this would be vertical, this would be blank. But if you name them, then it just makes it a lot easier for you to find what you're trying to work with. And to rename them, you just right-click on a container, rename, super easy. From here, you can also click on any of these and the layout container will be selected. So if you're trying to figure out where in the hierarchy is my stuff falling, you can start at the top. Just because something is at the top of the item hierarchy does not mean that it's actually at the forefront of your dashboard, since when you're using floating, you can send things backwards and forwards, similar to what you could do in PowerPoint or slides. And when you do that, that's going to move things to the top or the bottom. So just keep that in mind if you're trying to work through this and figure out what the heck is going on there. Next tip, staying within our working dashboard, we'll talk about adjusting container placement with shortcuts. So if I have a floating container like I do here, I can select this and using my arrows up, down, side by side, go up, go down, go side by side. You can only do this with floating, which is another reason that I really like floating. You can also double click it and just move it anywhere you would like. Anything within this container will move. In addition to using the shortcuts, you can go over into layout and manually change your X and Y coordinates. This allows you to have greater precision with how you're moving things. And I tend to use the X and Y coordinates if I have several layout containers with filters and I don't have them all in the same container, but I want them all to line up. I might have my grid turned on and I can see one is just a couple pixels off, and some people may not notice that, but if you have a pretty detailed eye, you might, and your client probably will. So easy to line those things up. Select your layout container. I can see this is set to X46. All I need to do is select this, go to X46, and that's going to move that guy over so then it gets nice and flush. You can also use this to adjust the width and height. You could do the same thing here, dragging this up or down, but this just gives you some more precision. So use whatever option works best for you. Another tip is to toggle between dashboard and layout using the T key on your dashboard. This isn't one that I use super often. I admittedly am not great with using the Tableau shortcuts, but they save you a second or two, so it's easy if you're trying to toggle back and forth between those. Our next tip is making use of white space. So we have this concept of outer and inner padding, which wasn't something I really understood very well in Tableau until I started working at Evolytics and building out a lot of dashboards for clients. So I have two copies of the same sheet here with border and a background color set. So starting off with outer padding, you can see that Tableau by default adds 4 pixels of outer padding. So what exactly is outer padding? This provides additional space beyond the border and background color of your objects. If we were to go and adjust this down, you can see that your border, it looks like it shrinks, the amount of color shrinks, and the size of your sheet starts to grow. By default, this is going to be set as all sides equal, but easy to change this if you wanted to have a thick upper and lower border and a lower side by side. Simply do that, and then we can up this and down this. Something that Tableau doesn't have, which I wish they did, was the ability to have different color borders on either side. That's not something that you can use right now, but maybe in the future. And then moving on to inner padding, over here, you can see no inner padding is set. By default, Tableau doesn't give us any of this. Essentially, what inner padding does is sets the spacing between the object contents and the perimeter of the border or your background. And if we increase this, let's say to 10, you can see that extends everything out and it shrinks the amount of space that the inside of your sheet has and creates kind of like a picture frame view. So using outer and inner padding together can create more white space on your dashboard, which just helps people to visualize the data better. It's easier for them to see where the differences are, and it's just a lot easier to read. So play with white space to increase your user's best experience. And our final layout tip is one that I actually just learned about this week. If you wanted to switch in the sheet that's here for another sheet, let's say you put one in on accident or you just want to switch it out, pretty easy to do. You'll see that this is kind of grayed out here. All you need to do is hover over any of these others, and with this arrow icon, click that, and it's going to pop in whatever sheet is that you just selected. Your formatting isn't going to carry over, so you're going to need to fix all of that in whatever you bring over, but super, super easy if you just want to make a quick change on the fly. Next, getting into design tips, and let's check how much time we have. We have 8 minutes. Okay, so fonts. Fonts is a really complicated topic within Tableau, and I could probably talk about this for a whole session, so I'm going to give you the super 1,000-level view of how fonts work. To ensure that a font is going to work when published to server, online, or public, it has to exist on all systems where that viz will be authored or consumed. So it needs to exist on your computer as well as the desktop computers of those who will be viewing your workbook. And it also must exist on Tableau server, online, or public. Basically, what this means is that you might use a font in a dashboard that you think looks great, and you might publish it to Tableau online, and it might look good to you, but someone else is going to view it, and it might look kind of weird to them because a different font is going to be swapped in. To be on the safe side, this is a list of Tableau fonts that are pretty much guaranteed to work because they're on basically everyone's computer, and the Tableau font family is installed with Tableau all the time. So this list is your safest bet. These are some that Tableau says are web safe, but they still might not work. So I encourage you to stick within the ones that do work. And if you're using Tableau Server, you can upload a custom font to Tableau Server, but in order for it to still work, you'll need to ensure that font is installed on everyone's computer. So like if it's your brand's font, there's a good chance that's installed on your employees' computers. But if it's a new font that you just found on the internet, you'll probably have to work with IT in order to get that installed. The next tip is a fun one. Getting creative by designing outside of Tableau. So I found this viz from Sarah Bartlett, which looks great, but how on earth could she have created this within Tableau exclusively? Like, look at this font, this cool background image. Well, she didn't, and that's really the case for a lot of viz of the days and vizzes that look super cool and complex. What she did is added this as a transparent background, and we can verify that just by Xing this out, and you'll see basically the whole thing disappears except for her charts. So she probably spent a lot of time building this out in Illustrator. You could use a wireframing tool. You could even do some pretty cool stuff within Google Slides, Google Drawings, PowerPoint, but getting creative outside of Tableau is a really nice way to take your vizzes to the next level. Our next tip is to use icons. This is my submission for Iron Viz 2020. I used icons just to illustrate the points that I was making for the different sets of data I was talking about. I also used an icon that you could hover over to see all of the resources or all of the sources that I had used in the making of my dashboard. A couple cool ways that you can get icons are flat icon and the noun project. Whenever you're using icons, always make sure that you credit them unless you're paying for icons, and you don't need to do that. And when you're downloading, be sure that you download as a PNG to retain transparency and do any editing on them before you bring your icon into Tableau. Similar to this design in an outside platform, you can use a transparent background to make your viz pop. For this example, I'm not going to rebuild it, but what I did is brought in this image of a dollar as a background. I didn't use fit or center since I liked how this was offset. And all I did was set the background to this chart to transparent so that it layered over nicely. And you can do transparent backgrounds in a lot of pretty cool ways. So I encourage you to play around with this if you haven't. And our final design tip is to use blank or text objects as borders, or not as borders, I'm sorry, as section dividers. So I have this example from Workout Wednesday, which is a great one for tiled layout containers. If you haven't done it yet, highly suggest that. I like to use blank objects. You can really do the same with text. You can see here that I have this header line. It's 5 pixels high. Make sure that you fix these, otherwise they can flex depending on the size of your layout container, and you probably want that to stay something static. And make sure that you use 0 outer and inner padding so that the divider just doesn't look weird at all. And last, we'll be getting into some interactivity tips. So going back to our working dashboard, I'm going to check the clock. 3 minutes and 45 seconds. We'll try to get through all of these. First tip is incorporating an interactivity by letting your users select their measures and dimensions. So what I've done here is created a parameter, a string parameter that has these measure names. And within a calc, I have mapped each of these. Pretty easy. Brought that into my viz. I've also set up another calc that will put in the currency sign or the percentage sign on the prefix or suffix of whatever my measure value is. So an easy way to reduce the amount of charts that you need to have if you give the end user the ability to edit them. We'll stay within this for our next tip, and the next tip is Viz in Tooltip. So this is a pretty new feature that was introduced in 10.5. Really easy to use. Go into your tooltip on whatever sheet it is that you want to have the Viz in Tooltip show on. Go Insert, Sheets. I have a bunch of sheets in here, but Viz in Tooltip is the one that I want to show. You can adjust your max width and max height to fit really whatever looks best. So by default, this looks pretty tall and wide. So I might adjust this down to make it a little bit wider and a little bit shorter. And your filters are going for my viz that I've created, super simple. I didn't have a lot of complex filters on the line chart that I'm showing, but filters within Viz and Tooltip can get a bit more complex. I don't have enough time to drill into those too deep, but just know that if you have a simple viz, probably don't need to do much with the filters field, but if you have a more complex viz, spend some time on that. Next, going back to our working dashboard, is giving your end users the ability to download. I know I don't like when my end users say that they want to download something as a PDF or, God forbid, a PowerPoint, but they always ask, so you might as well give them an easy way to do it. Tableau, I'm not sure which version, but a recent version gave you the ability to have a download object. So I've brought that over here. I've customized my button with a download image that I got off a flat icon, and I've given a tooltip. So if they hover over it, they're like, what is this icon? They can see download this dashboard and Alt click to download. And within here, you can choose cross-tab, image, PDF, PowerPoint. If you wanted to give them the ability to download multiple versions, you could easily just create several different buttons for them to choose from. Your end users probably also want to know how fresh the data is. So this is another really easy one to throw in that I put into the header of most of the vizzes that I make for clients. You'll create this within the title of your dashboard and choose the field data update time. And this is only going to show if you have at least one measure or dimension in the view. So if you have filters set at the data source level, that takes care of that. But if you don't have any filters, then you can drag at least one over, don't select anything, and then they'll be able to see when your dashboard was updated most recently. And our final tip is to show hide containers. And let me check how much time we have. We have 32 seconds. So last tip is going back over here. I have this play button since I wanted to put in a video that this Workout Wednesday was inspired by. Learn more about layout containers with Andy Kriebel. So you can see here, I have my edit button, vertical. When item is hidden, show this. I could also do a button appearance when the item is shown.
And YouTube is what will pop up. So my headset just died and my timer is going off. So I'm going to stop. Can you guys still hear me? Still hear me? Okay.
Yes, we
Cool.
can.
Cool. Well, that was just about it. So I ended just in time, which I'm frankly shocked by. I hope I wasn't talking too fast, but do you guys have any questions? I'm trying to find the chat.
There was one that came through on Snap to Grid. We answered in chat, but weren't sure if you knew of any feature available on Snap to Grid.
Are you saying how to get Tableau to Snap to Grid?
Is that like a feature like in Illustrator or Photoshop? Do you have that available in Tableau? It didn't look like it.
I don't think so. I've never seen that before. I think probably the closest you could get would be like if you're using a tiled layout, things will kind of snap, but it's not really snapping to the grid like the grid background. If that makes sense. Let's see other questions.
Hey, my name is Joe. And when you were showing Viz and Tooltip, you can actually put multiple sheets in there. It'll stack them horizontally. You can't, move them around like a dashboard. And they don't give us the capability to do a dashboard in Tooltip, but you can put multiple sheets in there. And if you can make it, there's sometimes where you might want to see one particular viz under a certain circumstance and a different viz under a different one. Make them swap in and out where the sheet you don't want to see would go blank and the other one. It's really cool.
Oh wow! I haven't.
So there's a lot of toys that you can do with that and expand out the capabilities in there. If you put a second sheet in there right now, it'll just put that second sheet below the first one and display them both.
Oh wait, sheets. Oh wow, that's really cool.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you for letting us know.
it's a quasi dashboard in a tooltip.
Something to keep in mind with Viz and Tooltip I forgot to mention is that the more that you layer in and the more complex your filters get, they can definitely slow things down. I had a client dashboard I built a couple of weeks ago that it was huge to begin with, and we were able to trace a lot of it back to issues with their Viz and Tooltips and the filters going on there. So just use it somewhat sparingly if you're having efficiency issues to begin with.
There was another question too. My colleague had typed in somewhere, for the download buttons, why not just use the download that's on the server?
Oh yeah, I still have clients that ask me how to download, even though that button is there. So it's really just a way to make it even more straightforward. But
yeah, it's a convenience, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely not necessary, but I still have a lot of clients ask about it.
I had never seen that before, so I'm glad you did that.
Good, I'm glad.
So do you hook that to a specific sheet? If there's 15 sheets on your dashboard and they have a button there, I guess it would download the data that's on a particular sheet, right?
That's a good point. I actually don't know the answer to that, but let's check. Oh, okay. So you have the option to choose active sheet or entire workbook. So I assume
selected sheet. There's also a selected sheet thing there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how they turn it on. I'll have to play with that. That's cool. I didn't know that they had put that in there.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty recent one, but I wasn't able to trace back the version that it was introduced in. And I haven't really heard a lot about it in general. So definitely a cool feature to play around with.
One of the ways that we used it with our clients is we were able to do a different icon for each type of format they were able to download, which again, if you go up, it lists them in the drop down, but to be able to put a spreadsheet for an Excel or JPEG image for a photo, it made it a little easier for the clients to just know without having to look at a menu.
I guess you could probably put an image on that. Oh, you have that little down arrow. Is that an image that your own image? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you could probably put an image that says this one's Excel, this one's the whatever the image is that the PowerPoint uses and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can choose between image and text. So you could just say text or say PDF.
Cool.
Yeah. And on that point, just you can also stack this with the show high container tip that she went through and just kind of have the dashboard view and then have something explode out for those that like to see the tables, and then also give the button to download the table because there's always those that want to see the full table.
Always. I don't think we have any more questions in the chat, but does anyone else have any questions before we go into networking? Perfect. Well, let me close out of this.